All right, welcome back, everybody, to episode number 3 on the Woodward Pistons Draft Show. Today, we are joined by international scout extraordinaire Ignacio Rissotto, who is over at Draft Digest currently. To give you an idea of the virtuoso that he is, he has worked for the Stepien. He was an international basketball scout there, international basketball scout with Spanish hoops as well. Was also the director of scouting at ID Prospects, and now currently, again, is a draft expert, a sports writer with Draft Digest. Who we had our guy, Motor City Hoops, Bryce Simon, who is also there at Draft Digest. Today, we're going to talk Victor Wembanyama. So who better than Ignacio Rissotto to do this international scout extraordinaire? Ignacio, just introduce yourself to the people. Let them know where they can find you on Twitter or if you have any other social media.
Well, first off, thank you for the invitation. It's always great for me. It's super fun to do the podcast season, and we did a podcast with you earlier in this draft cycle, and it was one of the most fun I had. And we generally the off podcast conversation when we're not recording takes up hours.
Yeah, we've almost been going an hour before we even started recording here.
Yeah. So again, thank you for the invitation. My name is Ignacio. I'm international scout. I've been, following exclusively the international prospects coming up in the pipeline, even those prospects who are 2, 3, 4 years away from the NBA. I've been doing international scouting full time since 2018. So I'm actually starting to scout the 2008 born generation now, which are the players who are going to be available for the 2027 draft. So that's going to be my 9th kind of generation or class of players that I scouted. And yeah, I work for Draft Digest now. I've been lucky enough to be part of some outlets who had amazingly talented scouts who gave me their time of day, who were generous enough to teach me about more than I ever will be able to process in terms of scouting, how to find prospects, how to evaluate, how to define what is valuable or not in a prospect from an NBA standpoint. And so, yeah, it led me to Draft Digest, where I'm right now, where I'm focusing on international and sometimes domestic high school prospects. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter at airball, EYRE ball. And I'm writing, I think, between 1 and 2 articles per week for Draft Digest. So if you want to stay up to date with draft and stash prospects, or know who's coming for next year's draft, or know who's coming for the next 2 or 3 drafts internationally, you can find all my work there.
Yeah, to say Ignacio is ahead of the game, it would be an understatement. Also, we're on the Woodward Pistons show. Ignacio is also a Piston fan, correct?
Yeah. I told you about how closely I've been following the last few years, now that we're picking high in the draft, and now that we're actually making good picks in the draft, and we don't have certain previous GMs anymore. And so it's
careful. Joe can hear you. He's right here.
No, I'm good with Joe. I'm not good with the guy who picked Stanley Johnson, Henry Ellenson, and didn't pick Donovan Mitchell in back-to-back drafts. So now that we're actually making good picks like Kate, like Jade and Ivy, it's like my fandom and my work kind of collided, and hopefully it will collide again this year once we get the number 1 pick.
Which is what we're here to talk about, is Victor Wembanyama. So the first question I ask Ignacio is, can you explain just how good Victor Wembanyama is? Are there enough words? Like, how can you put that into words, how good this guy is?
I think we have never seen a prospect who is his size do all the things he does. And in a way, like in a more general sense, it's like the evolution of basketball and the evolution of learning basketball as a skill and not as a position, leading to a prospect like Wembanyama. Because 10 years ago, maybe the trainers around Wembanyama, maybe the coaches in his youth teams would have said, hey, you're the tall kid, gain some weight, get your behind down in the post and, work from there and don't go in the perimeter. And that was maybe a valid strategy back then. But now the strategy and it talks about how to develop a young prospect, especially when they start playing basketball at 9, 10, 11 years old, is like, we don't know how tall you're going to be once you're done growing up. So learn everything. Learn how to handle the ball, learn how to shoot, learn how to defend inside and out, learn how to pass. And then as you grow older, you're going to see how much, how that helps you win or not. And you're going to start shedding those parts that don't help you win. With Victor, what happened is that he's just so good at most of the skills that he pretty much brought everything to the professional level. And so the evolution of basketball led to a prospect who ended up being 7'4", 7'5", being trained to do everything. And he has been able to use at least a little bit of everything to help his team win. Because what people like, we've been following Victor this year and his absurd stat lines and how he's probably going to be the MVP of the French league. But what people don't realize is that his team is winning games. They are the second best team in the French league. They had a bunch of injuries. They lost Hugo Besson. He got drafted last year. He's out for the season with a hip injury. Their starting small forward was Armel Traore. He's done for the season as well. And so he's been able to, despite not being a traditional powerhouse, because Metro is not a traditional powerhouse in French basketball, and despite all the injuries, he's been able to use every single one of his skills to lead his team to winning. And so what makes him special as a prospect is the fact that he's so tall, he's just so uniquely his physical tools are unique, but not just in the terms of size, also in terms of coordination, mobility, body control. And for that size and for those tools, he's also able to do a lot of things inside and out. If in short, we've never seen a prospect as versatile as he is. Now, there are some flaws within each skill, some things that might not translate from day one to the NBA, but we've never seen such a versatile prospect. LeBron was the best prospect ever. I get it. Victor might be the most versatile prospect ever just because of his body type.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we have to bring up LeBron when talking about how good of a prospect is, this speaks to that, right? That it is actually a conversation. Even scouts that are conservative in their valuations and conservative in like who the comps they give out are, every last single one of them is like, oh, maybe this is somebody like LeBron, or we have to consider them as a prospect at that level.
He's on that tier, definitely. And I got earlier this year when, people in draft Twitter were following Victor Wembanyama's games live, and they were analyzing his game and cutting plays and putting up play clips live as they were happening. I tweeted like, is this the most anticipated prospect ever? And obviously LeBron fans found it and kind of chewed me. But it was more of a comment on how much draft scouting has developed and how we have the tools now to evaluate a prospect from overseas live as the play is happening. And so he's, I think, probably the most over-scouted player ever, because back in the day, the scouts were the guys maybe writing for newspapers or for ESPN, or the guys appearing on broadcast. Now we have thousands of scouts, and there's thousands of people scouting the number one prospect each year. So yeah, let me again say this: not a better prospect than LeBron. Don't come at me, LeBron fans. I just think the physical tools are so unique that offer a bigger level of versatility that we haven't seen ever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would start to think, I mean, you can come at me, I don't care, that he's a better prospect than LeBron just from the physical aspect of it. There are not many human beings that are over 7 feet. So there's that already. Then there's even fewer human beings that can move the way that he can at that size. And then there are even fewer human beings that have IQ on both sides of the ball. So like, yeah, there is a legitimate conversation of like, this could be somebody that is better than LeBron just because of the physical side of it and the basketball skill that goes along with it. So we're both Piston fans. This is for Woodward Pistons. If the Pistons should be blessed again with the #1 overall pick, how would Wembanyama fit on this Detroit roster?
I think he would fit perfectly, just because I think our two cornerstones are Jaden Ivey and Kate, right? And everyone else is kind of can rotate, can be traded, or can be let go. Obviously, there are other players who are valuable, but and correct me if I'm wrong, you follow the Pistons more closely day to day than I am, but I don't think there's anybody besides those two guys who you would say we got to build around this guy. There might be complementary pieces here and there. Like I think Jalen Duren has had a really good rookie season. And he's one of those guys where if we end up falling to number 2, number 3 in the draft, then that's great. That's, you know, a guy that can become a starting center that can catch lobs and protect the rim. But you're not going to limit yourself in who are you picking with the #1 pick in the draft for Jalen Duren or for Wiseman or Bagley or, Killian or whoever, right? So we got those two guys that we hope we can build around in Cade as our main initiator, as our passer, and Jaden, who's going to be your perimeter scorer. He's going to shoulder some of the load of creation as well. And now you put Victor in the mix. And so the first thing you get is, okay, you're not getting only a presence in the perimeter, you're getting a presence on the interior. And Victor, one of the things that make him so valuable as a center, despite him, yes, he's skinny, he is not going to back down people in the post easily. But if, let's say, there's dribble penetration, and Kate is great at using screens to get downhill, and Jaden can just get downhill one-on-one. So whenever those two guys create an advantage, whether it is with a screen or with a quick first step being his opponent, what will come is the defensive help. And generally the help defender is the low man, the guy, guarding the center down in the post. And Victor has a really great catching ability. Like, his hands are huge standing reach, of course. So if you throw the ball in his general vicinity, and by the time the help defender, the guy that's supposed to be defending Wembanyama, when he turns his back on Victor, if you throw him the ball, it's an automatic 2 points. Automatic. Like, he's just so great in terms of catch and finish scoring below the rim. Whether you give him the ball like right here on his chest, or whether you throw a lob. If you throw a lob, he will catch it. So he just he just has this amazing catch radius where he doesn't necessarily need to be like right down below the rim to convert lobs, because he just has an 8-foot 8-foot wingspan. So he can be like maybe one or two steps away from the rim, because he just has that reach where, he will just dunk the ball. And there's also the level of touch on off-balance situations where, let's say, in that scenario, his primary defender goes in and helps contain dribble penetration. If you touch him or get him off balance, it's going to be an M1. He's just so good in terms of touch off balance. The thing is, he has such huge hands that he can cup the ball with one hand. It's not like, oh, it's a tip-in. He could just fully get the ball and place it as this mid-air, because also the level of hang time is insane. So he fits really well on a scheme where you get Cade, you get Jaden Ivey penetrating and creating advantages, and let Victor finish the play. But also, he offers a level of, floor spacing. He can shoot the three. So if you want to, let's say you don't want to have Victor below the rim, okay, he can now clear out, and if the corner is open, he's gonna hit the open jumper. And as he moves forward, that's gonna be day one. As he moves forward, you now have a guy who can create for himself. Maybe in the post, those shots, some teams value that more than others, but he can put the ball on the floor. He can attack a closeout. He can shoot off the dribble at a certain level. I don't think that's going to translate day one to the NBA, but he does so much things that you're going to alleviate the load of creation that Cade and Jaden Ivey get. So I think he fits beautifully with our other two cornerstones. I wouldn't worry about the rest. The rest, you can fill in the gaps later. But he fits beautifully with Jaden and Cade, because I think their skill sets are complementary.
Yeah, absolutely. Jaden's got great chemistry with both Jaden Ivey and with Cade Cunningham, or with Jaden Ivey has good chemistry with Jalen Duren and any of the other big men in there. That was who he mainly fed with pocket passes, with pick and roll feeds. Victor's just going to come in and he's going to have chemistry with him as well. And then Cade's favorite pass is the lob pass. So, just throw up as many lobs as you can to the guy with an 8-foot wingspan, and he's going to grab them with those ginormous eagle talons. It's just going to be game over. And then this is somebody that also has that pick and pop threat. That's something the team has really wanted. I think the other two guys that, again, you're right. They're not going to be you immediately max contract them when their time comes and all that stuff. But Jalen Duren and Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, Wembanyama fits and complements them perfectly as well. Beef Stew doesn't have the length, doesn't have the shot blocking ability. Wembanyama has that in spades. Doesn't really have the switch ability. He can switch. I think Wembanyama is a better perimeter defender than Isaiah Stewart, but Isaiah Stewart has had the experience to do that already. So you have two really good guys there to do that. And then Duren doesn't have floor spacing ability, is going to be more of a pick and roll threat, is going to be more of a rim protector, which I think, again, bodes well for Wembanyama, who I think would be better at the forward spot than at center. He's going to obviously play center in the NBA at times, maybe in a death lineup type of thing. But there he can take advantage of his perimeter skills, both on offense and on defense. Now we're just looking at wing defense. My own personal question for you, though, is the more I watch Wembanyama because of those perimeter skills, I'm I think he could play some small forward. And you could see a lineup with Cade, Ivey, Wembanyama, Beef Stew, Jalen Duren. Am I out of my mind to think that?
I think he's versatile enough where you would let's just try it. But I think basketball is a game of threats. So if you get Wembanyama to be a threat as a finisher below the rim, then the rest of the game kind of evolves around that. So you have the threat as a finisher. Perfect. You get a guy to just push him and not let him get to his spots, right? Which is a valid strategy. If I were an assistant coach for a team, I would say, fight for positioning and make it uncomfortable for him to get 2 feet in the paint. Because once he gets 2 feet in the paint, it's easier for him, right? Okay, so let's say you did a good job. You're a center. You did a good job of not letting him get to a spot in the paint. Perfect. Now you're so worried about that you didn't see him take 2 steps, come off an off-ball screen and shoot off a screen and drain the 3 in your face, right? But that happens because you're so worried about him being able to establish position deep that now he gets open for a shot. Okay, now next time you defend the shot, great, he now just put the ball on the floor and got downhill. But I think for me, it all starts with the threat of him being below the rim. You can scheme around that and make him a below the level a near the rim threat when he plays the 3. But I just think you would maximize things with him playing either at the 5 or playing at the 4 in a twin tower lineup. Because also, like, him playing at the 3 would mean that he would have to defend the perimeter. And it's not that I don't like him. I just think you lose a level of rim protection from the weak side if he's defending the 3. Like, you could put him there, but you're not going to maximize his skill set, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's more of the defensive versatility of Isaiah Stewart, who we've seen guard guards. So he can guard small forwards as well, right? He has that lateral ability to where it's like, okay, this is the guy that you kind of throw out there on defense at small forward, but maybe Victor works more as like small forward-ish on offense. Again, I readily admit this is a banana maybe lineup, but there are 2 guys in this draft who I think that I've been calling it the triple beef lineup because we have double beef with Beef Stew and Jalen Duren. But I think both Jarace Walker and obviously number 1 overall pick Victor Wembanyama could have this like triple beef because Isaiah Stewart's defensive versatility. If he doesn't space the floor out though, then yeah, I'll admit like this probably doesn't work. I think Isaiah Stewart's abilities to stretch the floor out could stretch it to where you have 2 guys potentially in this draft that could end up being able to slot in a small forward. And then you have 2 guys that have that switchability, and then Duren on the back end who doesn't have it as well, but can protect the rim. So again, I admit it's an out there idea, but it's one I think that Jarace Walker and definitely Victor Wembanyama, like it's in the conversation, and it's definitely in the conversation for Wembanyama. Just like you said, we've never seen somebody as versatile. And I think anybody that picks him, they would do themselves a disservice if they didn't just try him out. The reason why Giannis became a great player is because they were like, yo, he's kind of got handles like a point guard. He's kind of got passing like a point guard. Let's try him at point guard for a while. And then it didn't work out the way. And then he got bigger and bigger. And they're like, oh, let's move him to small forward. And then he got bigger and better at help side and just filling in all these little holes. And then they're like, hey, let's just put him at power forward center and let him keep running this. I think that should be what a team does with Wembanyama, is just like, let's try him out at these different positions. And then by year 5, we'll probably have like an MVP type candidate.
I got a question for you about the defensive fit. How do you feel about Kate Cunningham defensively, since you watch the Pistons more closely than I do? And what positions is he better defending? Because when you think about it, you have Wembanyama, who is, to me, his potential is multi-time defensive player of the year type of potential. Then you have Jalen, who is a really good rim protector. Then you have, I don't know how much is going to be with the Pistons, but you have Killian, who I think, well, now we realize that he might not have the scoring gravity to be your starting point guard, but you got a 6'6" guy, really fairly strong coming off the bench, and you can put him for lineups where you need his combination of passing and defense. And so if you believe in Cade as a defender, okay, now you have kind of this defensive synergy where, like, since everybody can guard their men, everybody can guard more than one position. Now you have something where, like, okay, we can force 1, 2, 3, 4 stops in a row, and we can kill games with a null defensive lineup. But to me, that depends on where you see Cade in terms of his level of, him being a defender. So, yeah.
I think he is a good defender and will continue to improve on that end because he's a communicator. The reason why Pistons defense was so bad is, number one, he went down. We all always underestimate how much of a communicator he is. He really showed it at Oklahoma State in his one season. I was telling you before we started, the one game that really impressed me with Cade was against Wichita State at Oklahoma State, because he only scored 10 points in that game. His shot didn't fall, but he was the one that made the clutch basket that made him go ahead, and he also had the game-sealing block, being a weak side rim protector. I think in the NBA, he's more of like a wing defender, shooting guard, small forward. Ideally, you want him on the worst of the two, but that's just NBA stuff, right? As like whoever is our engine, we don't want to have to rely on them to be our best defender as well. You see with KD and LeBron, who are some of the best defenders in the NBA, but you don't want to ask them to do that just because they have a level of energy. They're going to run out on that end as well. So you want Cade on those sides, and he is more of a better help defender than he is a man-to-man defender, which is not a bad thing either. But he's also a competitor, right? Like if you tell him to go guard LeBron, he's going to do it. I don't know how well he would be able to hold up, but I always would bet money on him competing on that end and knowing what to do. Still working on being a little bit too handsy. I remember last year, Chris Paul pretty much got him out of the game in like the first 5 minutes because it was like, hey, just don't touch him. What are you doing?
Chris Paul will do that to you.
Yeah.
He's ruthless with rookies. Yeah.
Yeah. But I believe in Cade because of the communication and the IQ. He's going to know where to go and be in his spots. And it's like a Paul Millsap level of defender is where I would put it. Millsap probably couldn't jump over a phone book. There are probably a few fans out there who could beat him in a foot race, but you watch the film and you're like, man, this guy is always in the right spot and he's always communicating. I think Cade will be like that on the guard position, wing position.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think going back to the fit with Wembanyama coming in, I think he will take a bit of the load of creation that Cade is shouldering, both from, Cade has to create for others and he's expected to create for himself. Now that self-creation, Jaden is, kind of, helping him with that. He's creating for others as well. He's, creating for himself. I would say that Jaden is more of a creating for himself one, creating for others two. And then the opposite is for Cade. He's going to create for others. He's going to be the number one in creating for others and the number two in creating for himself. Now you insert Victor there, and he's going to take away a bit of that responsibility of self-creation. And he's going to give the team another level of self-creation because you don't have someone who can really reliably self-create from the post. Someone who can, you have play finishers, but you don't have someone who's as versatile as a play finisher at Victor is. And you have someone, okay, now he's someone who might shoot off the dribble, might put the ball on the floor. So by doing that, I feel like he's going to help, Cade have a less of an offensive load, and maybe that unlocks some parts of his defense just because of the energy that's required to be the main guy on offense and also be expected to be like a key contributor defensively. You see it with Giannis as well. I think one of the criticisms of Giannis is like, oh, he doesn't guard the best offensive player in the opposite in the other team. And it's like, yeah, but he's one of the best help defenders in the world. And two, he just carries so much of the scoring load that you want him to have the legs to do that when the game is on the line, and not, be so damn tired of, guarding KD, LeBron, Jason Tatum, whoever, that he can't do anything on offense. So I think he's going to help Cade with that. KD is going to have to do a little bit less in terms of scoring, and maybe he will put a bit more on defense. And I think that, Wembanyama fits beautifully, not just on offense, but on defense as well.
So let's talk about some actual legitimate concerns with Wembanyama. I think like everybody's just been praising him up and down, as well they should, as we've been doing so far here. But every prospect has warts, right? Every prospect has things that they have deficiencies in. I just feel like Wembanyama is the default, and it's a lazy default. It's like, oh, he's injury prone. And it's like, number one, that's not true. There is nothing in the background that suggests he has any problems or long-term projections in his knees and his ankles and his hips, which is normally where big men have problems with. Like you think of Yao Ming, he had the foot problems before coming into the NBA. You think of Ralph Sampson, he had knee problems before coming into the NBA. There's not problems like that with Wembanyama. He's been nicked up here and there. Ricky O'Donnell over at SB Nation put together a nice, list of his injuries before coming in this season. And again, they're all minor, like little ankle injuries and whatever. And as you stated with Metropolitans 92, I think he's still the only player that played all 29 games. He's the player that's played the most minutes for that team, which you would think he would get, bed rest or load management, whatever you want to call it. But man, he has been an Iron Man. So again, the health concerns, I get it. Every last single player that's over 7 feet, you're going to consider that, because there's just not a long list of guys over 7 feet who have these long NBA careers that don't have an injury history behind them. But it's also lazy because you're just relying on that rather than diving into the film like Ignacio has. So let's talk about some legitimate concerns.
Yeah, I want to start with the injury thing. I don't really remember Wembanyama having significant injuries. I've been watching him since he's 15 years old. Maybe like a foot, foot injuries, but not the type of like it has anything to do with bones, cartilage, and ligaments or anything. Like just maybe a sprained foot one time, and he missed a couple of weeks. But he's leading his team in minutes. He has played near 1,000 minutes by this point, and he will play more than that before the season ends. He's the second player he's the player who has played the second most minutes in the French league this season, both in terms of minutes per game and total minutes. So he, like you said, he has been an Iron Man this year. Also, he has played for the French national team in the middle. So like I don't, obviously, like overseas leagues don't have the rhythm of the NBA where they play like 80 games in a season, but it wouldn't surprise me if he gets to like 50 games this season between national team and his team, both in regular season and the playoffs. And he gets to that 1,500 minute mark, which would be a great indication for his NBA durability. Also, like when we talked about carrying the load, he's carrying the load offensively and defensively for his team. So it's not like he's playing 32 minutes a game being off the ball and standing around and not doing anything. He's like handling the ball, shooting, creating his own shot, getting down to the paint, being the main rim protector for the team. So he's not just playing a ton of minutes, he's playing a ton of minutes with an incredible level of intensity when it comes to his role. So I don't think the injuries are a concern. What is a concern is the lack of strength, both in the upper and the lower body. You want him to get to a point where, it's kind of a fine line between growing and, getting stronger, but also I wouldn't want him to lose that level of mobility, coordination, flexibility, and body control. So any team that drafts him, yes, he's going to have to get him on a certain diet. He's going to have to get him in the gym, but they will have to find like the perfect spot between him growing stronger without him losing that speed, that quickness for his size, and that body control. So that's a concern, and that's a concern that kind of encompasses multiple areas of his game. Like, he's not a fully developed self-creator in the post because opponents are able to just not allow him to establish the position. So when you're fighting against him for post position, most centers in the NBA are going to win. So the other thing is he's fluid, but he's not exactly quick. So if you expect him to come in day one as a driver and create off the dribble for himself and blow by his opponents, that's not going to be the case. But also he's 7'5". What do you expect? So I think even if the ball handling is great, what you expect from him from day one is him just attacking closeouts, putting the ball on the floor selectively, punishing mismatches. Like if you guard him with a heavy, big, 7-footer or 6'11" guy who has heavy feet, he might blow by those guys. But if you guard him with a 4 or with a quicker 5, you're probably going to be able to hold him in the perimeter. When it comes to the shot, I think he's going to be a great catch and shoot and pick and pop guy from day one, at least capable at those things. I've just finished a piece for Draft Digest talking about his shooting versatility. And one of the things that get brought up at times with Wembanyama is like, if he's such a great shooter, why he's shooting only 31% from 3? And the fact is that he's shooting like 1.12 points per possession when it comes to catch and shoot and pick and pop, which is a really good number. It's above NBA average, or right around NBA average, which for a 7'5" guy, it's incredible. But he's shooting just 25% from 3 when it comes to isolation plays, off-screen plays, drives, pick and roll ball handling plays. So those plays represent around 40% of his 3-point attempts. So he's attempting a lot of shots that are really difficult. And even if the highlights are incredible, seeing him like get those like 1-foot, 3-point floaters, that we've seen, even if the highlights are incredible, I don't expect him to do those things at a high level at the NBA from day one. Like, I think he's going to be more of a pick and pop, catch and shoot, and maybe he mixes in like, readjusting, taking one dribble, pulling up, or the trailing 3 in transition where he takes a dribble and pulls up. But I don't expect him to like ISO guys from day one. I could see him do that 1 year, 2 years down the line, or maybe by the end of his rookie season. If he goes to a team, I think it's got to be a team where they just let him try stuff and realize that it might get ugly. It might be ugly on year 1, but he has to try it out and see what can be valuable or not at the NBA level, and what translates quicker to the NBA level and what doesn't translate, or what might take a while. So yeah, he's despite the highlights, he's not going to self-create as a driver or as a shooter at a high level from day one. That's another issue. And I would say probably the third issue, the only issue defensively, is again the lack of strength. He's going to get dunked on, and you're going to see him get dunked on, and a lot of people on Twitter are going to say, are gonna post like skull emojis and etc. And if he goes to your team, you have to know that he's gonna get dunked on. He's gonna get back down to the post, but he's gonna probably lead the league in blocks by year 2. So I would trade that any day of the week, because he's just so great when it comes to finding the ball as a shot blocker. He's just so accurate. And the final thing when it comes to blocking shots is he's going to make some blocks that are going to be so incredible that they're going to be called for fouls. I think the refs are going to be one of his biggest opponents coming into the league. And I saw that in the game against G League Ignite, where he got called for a few blocks where, man, those are clean blocks. But, subconsciously refs think, okay, if he got to block that shot, it's got to be a foul. And it's not. It's just he has an 8-foot wingspan. That's how they do it. So even for the refs, it's going to be a period of adjustment of having a guy who can do those type of things. It reminds me of Shaq in a way, where even I think Shaq talked about David Stern telling him, if the refs would call every foul every time they foul you, games would last 4 hours. Just because everybody was fouling Shaq, and refs, not having seen someone so powerful physically, didn't know how to, call plays for him or against him. So I think we might see something of that with Wembanyama. They haven't seen someone so, long at an NBA setting that they might not know how to call those type of plays. So yeah, those are some of the concerns that I have with Victor. But if you realize, most of the concerns have to do with adaptation and with year one. I don't think, besides the lack of strength, I don't think there's any concern where I say, yeah, he might not be able to overcome this with time, with repetition, and with enough experience. So yeah, there's legitimate concerns, but most of them have to do with year one and with how teams are able to let him play through those concerns, or let him play through the ugliness of being a rookie at the NBA level.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, when we say these things, it's like, okay, the concerns we have is like, oh, if he doesn't create, he ends up being Jaren Jackson Jr., which is the Defensive Player of the Year candidate, right? And so if you're talking about that being like the floor, then it's a whole nother level. So yeah, that's just amazing and speaks to his abilities. Final question on Wembanyama I want to ask is, if everything breaks right for Wembanyama, what do you see? Do you think he's like a top 15 player in the league, top 10, top 5, or maybe the best player in the league?
I think the floor for him, let me start with the ceiling. I think the ceiling is best player in the league. I think the realistic ceiling, so that's the 100th percentile where the shot comes around, he becomes a shooter off the dribble, he becomes someone who can, create mismatches against opponents one-on-one in the perimeter. He becomes someone who is just unstoppable in the post, whether that is as a finisher or as a self-creator, and becomes just incredibly dominant on defense. And I think in that case, if everything breaks right, every part of his skill set breaks right, he becomes the best two-way player in the league, and becomes just so good offensively that he's going to be the best defensive player in the league, and also so good offensively that he's just the most valuable player every year. And he has this run of, multi-time MVP, multi-time defensive player of the year, and most valuable player in the league. I would say a realistic ceiling is he becomes someone who is great as a play finisher, spaces the floor really well. I'm talking about, mid to high 30s from three on interesting volume, someone who can, selectively put the ball on the floor to create, but that's not, the main part of his game. The main part of his game is going to be play finishing, creating on the post, and shooting threes and attacking closeouts. And then again, in that, like, let's say 75th percentile outcome, he becomes a multi-time defensive player of the year. And so that is also enough for him to become the best player in the league for me. Even though, like, one of the things he might lack, which is creating for others, and not that he's a selfish player or that he doesn't know how to read the floor. I think you just need to have some level of, putting the ball on the floor and being the main guy and directing traffic that he just hasn't had to do in his career. He might do that from the post, but not from, like, top of the key or behind the three-point line. And creating for others, it's probably the most valuable skill in the NBA right now. So that's why I think it's not that he's never going to be the best player in the league because of that, but there's kind of a part of his game that other players like, let's say, Luka or Jokic or currently LeBron, that's the bread and butter of their game, just creating for others. So he's going to be limited in that sense, but that doesn't take away from his potential to become that multi-time MVP type of player. So yeah, that's the ceiling. The floor, as with every prospect, I don't want to say the floor is non-NBA, but there, if, let's say, a catastrophic injury happens, and he loses the quickness or the body control, yeah. But if he doesn't lose the quickness and body control, I would say the realistic floor for him, or what he's going to be at day one, is a stretch five who becomes one of the best rim protectors in the league and can also maybe put the ball on the floor a couple of times to, make one or two shots from the post or as a driver per game. But he becomes mostly a 3-and-D or a 3-and rim protection player in the league, which is also extremely valuable. Jaren Jackson is a really good comparison. Maybe he becomes like 7'5" Jaren Jackson. And that's, I think, I don't want to say like a floor, but I would say a realistic year one outcome, a realistic medium outcome for year one, which is incredible for a rookie and for someone 7'5".
Yeah, I agree with you that if everything breaks right, I mean, this is somebody that legitimately will be in the conversation every year of, like, this is the best player in the league, the best player in the world. I think even at the, like you said, 75% outcome, I can't find a comp. I'm not going to give Wembanyama a comp, but somebody said along the way, I forget which scout or, podcast or whatever, they're like, what if Rudy Gobert was taller? He didn't get exposed on the perimeter. Like, he actually had those skills and he could hit threes. Like, because again, Gobert's in the conversation every year for Defensive Player of the Year. He's this ginormous human being who has shot blocking instincts that are unparalleled. Like, that still seems like top 10, top 5 player every single year, right? With the perimeter skills. Again, even like you said, with the self-creation, which it's really hard. And to me, my biggest knock on Wembanyama is his dribble is so high that, like, there are going to be guys in the league like a Patrick Beverly, like Alex Caruso, Javon Carter, these other smaller guys that I guarantee they're going to see film and they're like, man, I'm getting like 3 steals tonight, especially in his rookie season, to where that, I mean, that's one of the more underrated aspects of Giannis's game is he understood how to dribble like a guard to where he's not bringing it up too high, and it's hard to really poke that ball out of there. I think Wembanyama, that's going to be something that could limit him long term of being able to, like you said, put the ball in the deck and more in limited spots. But again, even if he doesn't have that, we're talking again like Rudy Gobert with perimeter skills. Yeah, that still seems like top 5, top 10 player in the league. The last question I want to ask Piston related though is there any scenario in which the Pistons are like, hey, we'll trade you the number 1 overall pick for blah? Because we did this with Scoot Henderson. We came up with a lot of scenarios, but is there any scenario for trading out of getting Victor Wembanyama?
Wow. Not for picks. Definitely not for picks. I don't think even Oklahoma offering, if Oklahoma offers they're like
All 38 picks or whatever they have. Yeah.
No, like there's not a combination of picks that is enough for me personally to give up on Wembanyama. Even realizing that Scoot Henderson is a special prospect in his own right. Maybe if my team had its center of the future, and I would say, and maybe if I felt like we need like a really great perimeter initiator more than we need another center. And if I felt great about Scoot being a generational prospect, then I might say, okay, what if I get the number 2 pick? What if I drop down to number 2 and I get Scoot Henderson plus picks for the future? Maybe in that scenario, but that scenario just doesn't happen because I don't think which teams in the NBA would you say have like a generational center where which teams in the NBA Wembanyama wouldn't be the starting center day one?
0, right? Yeah. I think that's the answer to this is just like, well, this is why I did where does he end up? Like he could be the, top 5 best player in the league question. Why I did it before this. That's the answer, right? If the answer is he has potential to be the best player in the league, there's no scenario in which you trade the number 1 overall pick, right? Even if you have concerns, because if that's your evaluation, and I haven't met anybody that would really wildly disagree with that, there's that actual legitimate potential. There's no way you can pass it up, right?
And there's also like, I think the most interesting question here is which players would you trade, which current NBA players would you trade Victor for? And I think in that case, it becomes a thing of what's your team context? Like let's say Oklahoma City gets the number 1 pick. They might be closer to contention than the Pistons are. So they might say, okay, what if Milwaukee offered Giannis? You probably say yes because you have a team around Giannis that you can go and compete right away. Or what if if Boston offers Jason Tatum? Or what if
I have one because Luka and Dallas, right? That was the one that I was thinking about because they could give number 10 and Luka. But even in that scenario and thinking of it for the Pistons, like the answer has to be no, because Luka's not going to fit on this team, right? You can't have Cade, Luka, Ivy, and that's a disaster waiting to happen. And even any of the other lottery teams like San Antonio, Luka would fit in well there. But it's hard because then you have to go back and forth of like, is Wembanyama somebody I would believe in more than Luka? And you got to construct the roster around Luka after that point, right?
And also the years of team control that you have with a rookie contract versus someone who's already on their second contract. The question becomes, yes, Giannis, Tatum, Luka, Ja Morant, like they are the transcendental type of players that you hope Wembanyama will be, or that you hope your number 1 pick will be. However, do you prefer like 4 years of Doncic versus the next 9 years of Victor? And that's what you're actually trading, right?
Yep.
And that becomes more clear with teams who are really early in their rebuilding process, like the Pistons are, like the Rockets are, like the Spurs are. Those teams are so early in the rebuilding process that you say, okay, maybe I hope Wembanyama will be one of those transcendental players one day. But if Doncic, let's say we get Doncic, right? Besides the fit of the rest of the squad, it would take us, even with Luka, it would take us more than 4 years to build a roster around him. Like, and if he wasn't able to do it with Dallas' current roster, why would we think that just adding Luka would make us a contender? Like, it's not a league anymore where you have one guy and that one guy can take you to a championship. It's just not that league anymore. And if the goal is to build towards a championship, I think I prefer 9 years of Victor, the next 9 years of Victor, instead of the next 4 years of another prospect, considering that I'm early in the rebuild process. If I were a team contending, then maybe I would probably think about it, because I would say, okay, maybe I give up the next 9 years of Wembanyama just to get 4 years of someone who I know is going to be transcendental right away. And with that player besides the squad I already have, I can go to a conference finals or a finals right away.
Yeah, and it would take those level of prospects. We're throwing out Luka, Giannis, Tatum. That's how great Wembanyama is. But all of these teams in the lottery would not trade if they get the number 1 overall pick. Just send in the envelope as soon as you can. As soon as whoever wins the lottery, just announce it to the world. It's over and done with. So we are not only here to talk about Wembanyama, though. We also are here to talk about Gabriele Procida, who is playing for Alba Berlin, who the Pistons selected last year with one of their second round picks. On the year, Procida is scoring 5.7 points per game, 1.8 rebounds, 0.5 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.3 blocks. Shooting splits of 61% from 2, 24.1% from 3, and then 75.8% from the free throw line. As Americans, I'm going to do a little bit of generalization here, because I've seen this a lot. We look at European prospects like this and we're like, why is this somebody to be excited about? Especially the 3-point percentage when he's sold as a 3-point shooter. Again, I brought you on because you're the international scout extraordinaire, and anything that I've followed with Procida this year, I haven't watched any of his full games, but I've been able to keep up with him because of Ignacio's coverage and updating us here. And you did just recently do an update and like an overall season projection on it. So give us some context into these numbers. I will just say that Alba Berlin team is not fantastic. They're not doing Procida any favors. So fill us in on Gabriele Procida. What does he look like? Like, why should we be excited for him as Pistons fans? And when could you conceivably see him playing in the NBA?
So last week I finished an article for Draft Digest on the draft and stash prospects from last year's draft, both the bigs, the guards, and the wings. And when it was time to put all prospects in a tier on how NBA ready they are, I ended up putting Procida among the guys who would mostly be G League guys if they come next year. And the reason why I say that is Procida was a really great shooter when he was playing in Italy. He played, I think, 3 or 4 years of professional basketball there for the main league in Italy. And this year he moved to Alba Berlin, a team in the German league, but also a team who plays EuroLeague, which is going to be closer to the NBA type of athleticism, physicality, and just intensity and speed of the game than the Italian league will be. Alba is a really good team, a powerhouse within the German league, but when it comes to when it comes to EuroLeague, they are not one of the powerhouses. They are not Real Madrid, Barcelona, Turkish teams. Not even the Greek teams, I would say. They are kind of closer to the bottom, but the level of competition is great, and there's a huge jump in terms of salary between the Italian league and a EuroLeague team. That's clear. So Procida, I think, did the right thing going to EuroLeague just to get 1 year of like really tough level of competition. But I think what this year has shown is that I think he needs a bit more time before he gets to the NBA. The jump from Italian league to Euro League obviously brought those concerns, especially with the shooting. One of the things that really concerned me, and I don't have the statistics here, but was not only how low his percentages as a shooter were, but also how low his percentages was when shooting open jumpers. I want to find the Procida just 27.8 of his 3-pointers and 28.5% of his jumpers, of his open jumpers, which is shooting 28% on open threes is really concerning. Because you are expected to be automatic in those type of shots. And also, when you go to EuroLeague team as a young prospect, you're mostly expected to hit your open jumpers, and that's your main focus on offense. And he's certainly not doing that. So for me, I think Procida is someone who I would expect to be there in Europe for one more year. And if the Pistons bring him in, I expect him to be mostly on the G League squad, then maybe get some minutes at the end of the year, and then be ready for year 2. Now, how does he play? He's 6'6", fluid with the ball in his hands, not super quick, but really fluid. Love his footwork, love his ability to create space. Defensively, I heard some Pistons fan like selling him as a 3-and-D guy. I don't think he's like a guy that's going to defend threes at the NBA level right now, just because of how skinny he is. He's 6'6", but he doesn't play like bigger than his size. So mostly someone you put with 2 guards, and then you hope he will develop in terms of strength. And you know, the flashes of ball handling, putting the ball on the floor, attacking on drives, and passing on the move are interesting. But he's mostly expected to come as a shooter. And I just think he needs one more year to really, you know, get into the rhythm of the Euro League, and maybe then he makes the jump for the NBA. One prospect he reminded me of, and when the Pistons took him, I was kind of surprised, but because he reminded me of David Aservidis a lot in that sense of, you know, having the size of a wing, sort of kind of can put the ball on the floor, but he's not super quick. He can make the pass on the move, but he's not really a point guard. Really great footwork, really great shooters. And Servidis just was never able to, you know, get to that NBA level. Even if I feel like Servidis was a better shooter coming out of Europe than Procida is. So yeah, I would say Procida is maybe better defensively than Servidis, who was just a net negative on that end of the floor. But, you know, not having it worked out with one prospect, just to pick a really similar prospect a couple of drafts down the line kind of surprised me, because teams tend to get burned by a certain archetype, and they maybe just, you know, learn not to value that archetype so much. But yeah, someone who I think has potential. I really like his long-term potential. Always bet on the guys who can dribble, sort of pass, and sort of shoot at wing size. But I think he needs one more year, at least one more year for sure.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Peja Stojakovic took 2 years before he came over. Bogdanovic took 4 years, I believe, didn't come over until he was 25. Our guy Bojan, I think, took 3 years, didn't come over until he was 25. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more seasoning, especially with these Euro guys. If you find that you identify that talent early on, because I definitely think the athleticism pops is more what I see every time I watch Procida. That game or highlights is like, I believe he will hang athletically in the NBA, which I think Davidas, that was the big thing that kept him out. They had him on the Motor City Cruise. He was here just to sit on the bench, but man, that just seemed to be the thing. Was not an athlete and definitely not an NBA body with how skinny he was. So thank you for updating us on Procida, because he's somebody that I think the team wants to invest in long term, and we've kind of forgotten about as a fan base. So the final thing that we will talk about is there is a coaching search for our Pistons, as Joe D makes calls furiously. I keep telling him he doesn't, work for the team anymore, but he's not listening to me. So who would you like to see out of the candidates, number one, that have been announced? We have Charles Lee. We have Quinn from the Heat. We also have Jerry Stackhouse's name has been floated out there, and the other one's Adrian Griffin Sr. Those are like the names that have consistently been reported, whoever's been reporting them. And then Kevin Ollie has indeed interviewed for the head coaching position already. That's been announced. And is there somebody else out there who you would be like, man, I really, really, really hope the team at least gives them consideration?
I can really claim to know the in and outs of each coaching staff, but I know the track record of certain teams, and I think I know what we need. And I think what we need is to have somebody come in, look at our young roster, develop them, maximize their skill set, and be able to define by the end of the season, okay, these are the guys we are moving forward with. These are the guys that we are going to focus, and this is how we are going to play, right? And I think the X and O's, you can have better or worse guys, but I think that the ability for a coach to develop and maximize talent is, at this point in the rebuild, is what we should be looking for. I know he's not on the list of candidates. I always say that whenever there's a team that wants to do more with less, Kenny Atkinson should be on the mix, but he's apparently not on the mix, but he would be my pick if I had to. If he's not on the mix, then I would go to the teams who had talent with developing young players and developing players on the margins. Miami Heat, they always develop those second rounder undrafted guys. Memphis, we talked about it previous to the podcast, but with the success Memphis has had with pretty much every single one of their draft picks, I don't know why that coaching staff doesn't get a part of the credit when it comes to coaching searches. Like, if I were a rebuilding team, I would go and say, okay, who on Memphis was responsible or had a hand in developing Desmond Bain, Santi Aldama, Triple J, and just bring him in. I know they have a great front office, great scouting department with a lot of smart people there, but there's got to be a point where the coaching staff also gets that credit. And so whoever is on that coaching staff, if the background and etc. really fits, then I would like to see someone from those type of teams who've had recent success at developing players, because that's pretty much what we need. Also, Oklahoma City as well. But I think we have to prioritize, player development over, recent basketball success from certain coaches or certain coaching assistant coaches. So whoever fits that need and whoever has that background in success in developing young players, I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah, and to give people an idea of that Memphis coaching staff, if you just look on Basketball Reference, their assistant coaches and staff that are listed are Blake Ahern, Brad Jones, Darko Rajakovic, David McLaren, Sonia Raymond, Vitaly Potapenko, and the one coach I am familiar with is Scooney Penn there. I think Scooney Penn should be a name that's thrown out there. He's been there a while. I know he's a good development coach. He's somebody I don't really know the X's and O's on, but is somebody, like you said, who's been underrated and really hasn't been rated at all many different times. So I'm with you. I don't know why Taylor Jenkins and the staff just kind of get overlooked, but that would be a good one to dive into. The Kenny Atkinson thing, I agree. I wouldn't be mad at it, but I guess also kind of don't want to retread And then, I mean, there've been like various reports of him being kind of like abrasive, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, an abrasive coach isn't bad. I'm a big Rick Carlisle fan. He can be described as abrasive, right? Tom Thibodeau is nothing but abrasive, but players love him, and he works. He knows how to coach up defense and get a lot out of a roster that might not be there. The one of the candidates that have been floated out there, I did help put together a list on profiling some of the candidates, the three: Chris Quinn, Charles Lee, and Adrian Griffin Sr. for Woodward Pistons. So you can look up that article on woodwardsports.com. Brandon Dent put it together, and I just broke down those three candidates. I think Charles Lee is the one of the three that I like the most, just because in the background I've done, he was a high-level player at Bucknell who helped lead that team to one of their best records ever. That team he was on in 2006 might be the best team that Bucknell ever put together. At 27-5, they made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament, where they lost to number one seeded Memphis that year. So he has that. And then the past 9 seasons, he's been with Coach Bud, both first at Atlanta and then with the Bucks. And any film and anything you see on him, you see him working with young players. And that Bucks team also has developed on the margins of finding like a Pat Connaughton, who was integral to their playoff run, digging up Javon Carter, who I've always been a great fan of, and they finally deployed as that point of attack and three-point shooter. Even undervaluing or finding guys that are undervalued that have, let's say, quirks, for lack of a better term, like Grayson Allen, who I hate to bring up his name, but I mean, they have him working in the exact role that he needs to be working in there. DiVincenzo was another guy they found. Bobby Portis, they brought in even after all the other idiots that had him before were like, he's an attitude problem, we don't know how to use him. It's like, no, the Bucks know perfectly how to utilize him. And you see Charles Lee in a lot of videos and stuff talking to these guys, and specifically to Bobby Portis. So that is a great track record. And they won a title too, right? You want a guy that has that experience to go along with it. So I think he's the best of the names that are floated out there. I would love for them to have Charles Lee. Another name that I want to float out there is Jama Mahalela, who is currently on the Golden State Warriors staff. He was with the Raptors beforehand, and Coach Casey's the one that helped bring him in to the Raptors and got him his start there. He was just kind of like volunteering, doing camp workouts and stuff. Then Casey brought him in to be on staff. He's another guy that does have a playing background too. Played in Canada though. He won a Canada West title with the University of British Columbia up there, and then started showing up with the Raptors and got on their staff there. Super well organized guy. Him, if you look up anything on him, every single player has nothing but great things to say about him. From the top stars of like Steph Curry all the way down to the rookies still trying to find their way, in Moses Moody. Like, this is somebody you can tell gets things organized, isn't like incredibly harsh on players, is more of a teacher, which again, I think is something the team needs, as you said, focused on development. But also I think the attention to detail to where he is with every single player, from the superstar to that rookie trying to find their way. I think he's another guy that just needs to be floated out there more because of those leadership skills, which honestly, it's less about X's and O's. There are very few coaches, I think, that make it through that just focus on X's and O's. I mean, you dissed on Stan Van Gundy, and rightfully so. I think he's one of those coaches that the only reason he's been so successful is because he is such a great X's and O's coach. He really knows how to coach defense, but man, he wears on everybody. I just heard a story recently with Richard Jefferson, where when Stan went to the Magic and Arenas was there, they have these like hours long practice. And Arenas was like, you can either have me for shoot around or you can have me for the game. And Van Gundy was like, well, if you're not a shoot around, you can't be in the game. And Gil was like, okay. Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't want to coach like that. Yeah. And then I think those coaches, again, that are more understanding of personalities and navigating those things, along with the X's and O's, are the ones that stick. I mean, look at the guys that have had the jobs for a long time now: Steve Kerr, Eric Spoelstra, even Thibodeau, who is abrasive, but like, I've never seen a player talk bad about him, right? I've never heard of his practices being like abusive or just ridiculous. All of his players love him. So Charles Lee, Jama Mahalela, Kenny Atkinson for sure. I think at least the names that are coming out to me, I haven't heard of one of them that I'm like, oh my gosh, no. At least the ones that are floated out there, again, are focused more, it seems like, on development and not just trying to hire a big name.
Yeah, and it's about creating a culture as well. And I think the thing with Kenny is that when he had that team with a lot of like scrappy guys, they didn't have like any superstars back when they had. If I recall correctly, it was the team that had D'Angelo Russell,
Yeah,
Karis LeVert,
Dinwiddie.
Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, and the way he made that team play, and he made that team buy into the culture. And at the end of the day, it was a team that was bigger than the sum of its parts, which is what you want from a coach. Now, then they got KD and then they got Kyrie, and it didn't work out because it wasn't the same type of group of people, right? It was, the stakes were higher, and they were, people in another point of their lives, and at times egos clash. And so I think at the end of the day, you have to find a coach that builds a good culture and makes players buy into the culture. You can't. This quote is from Joe Dumars. You can't be successful in this league without having a good culture, or without having a culture at all. And I think if you, even though there has been kind of teams that are kind of put together, kind of in express mode, I would say, like the Raptors when they got Kawhi, or the Lakers when they got all that bunch of guys. If you look at even both of those teams who hadn't been together that long, it was a lot of players coming in, but also buying into the culture the team already had. You can really tell me that Toronto didn't have a culture before Kawhi got there. They had a bunch of guys. They just swapped one of the main pieces. The Lakers, I think they were just a team with a bunch of veterans who, created that culture for themselves. And the culture was, I don't know if I can curse on this podcast, but let's stop with all that bull, and let's go win a championship, because for most of those guys, it was maybe the last time they were going to be able to, like Dwight Howard, or I think JaVale McGee was on that team. So it was like, man, let's cut with the bull crap. Let's go win a championship, and let's get behind these two guys who are going to lead us to promised land. And so at the end of the day, you have to get a coach who understands the players and not only develops them, which is a huge part of it, and it's what I think we should focus, but also someone who can build a culture and clash with the players. But I don't want to say a coach that doesn't clash with the players. A coach that has the necessarily clashes with the players to get the team in line and build that culture. So yeah, it's hard because you can look at the track record of a coach, but there are things that you're never gonna know because they happen behind closed doors, and you can have all the sources you want, but you're never gonna know what to expect from a coach after he gets that head coaching job. Is he going to change? How is he going to handle the egos? Or simply, like, is he going to be able to develop chemistry with your stars or with this particular person? Like, at the end of the day, it's like when you go into a job, you're not going to fit in with every coworker. You're not going to, have chemistry with every single coworker, but you have to find a way to make things work for the company. So basketball is pretty much the same.
Yeah, and to push back against me with Kenny Atkinson, he did end up on Golden State staff, which to me is always a good sign when like a coach gets let go and then they end up on a great staff. It's not like he got banished down to Houston or somewhere that is like directionless. That would always be a major red flag to me of like, ooh, it seems like nobody really wanted him. But no, Golden State and that staff were like, hey, we need this guy to help us improve, and we want him on our staff. We want that voice in the room. That's a good thing in his cap, in my opinion, too. And also, you get an idea of just like again the gears shifted there, like you're talking about in Brooklyn, right? And it reminds me a little bit of Monty Williams, not necessarily the exact same situation, but gears shifted in New Orleans. It wasn't that he was a bad coach. It's just that, there's a new GM, there's a new, regime that comes in, and they just want to change course because they want their guy. It happens so often. And I think those are the coaches in terms of a quote unquote retread that I would buy more into, because Monty Williams was one of those ones that I was like, man, somebody needs to give him another shot because he just didn't get a fair shake. It's not like David Fitzdale. Sorry, David Fitzdale, but like you got enough like bites of the apple between New York and Memphis that like I know LeBron and all those guys still go to bat for you, but like the wheels fell off at every stop. That's definitely not the case with Kenny Atkinson. We see that he is still desired by championship winning teams, and he's helped them in their development. So yeah, should be a name that's out there. I know he's interviewing for the Rockets, but we'll see how that goes. So I just want to say muchas gracias to Ignacio, who is coming to us live from Uruguay. I don't know if I stated that at the beginning. Thank you for taking time with us today. Thank you for all the knowledge dropped on Wembanyama and Procida, who hopefully we'll see in a Pistons uniform sometime soon. Again, plug all your social media, let everybody know where they can find you, what you have for Draft Digest, and what you have coming up.
Again, thank you so much for the invitation. Hopefully, I'll be back here once we got the number one pick, and we're talking about how we saw Wembanyama play at Summer League or something like that. But yeah, it's always awesome to talk to you and to be invited to the podcast. Find me on Twitter, Airball, EYRE Ball. Most of my content is on Draft Digest, si.com/draft. And what I have coming up, I just finished and sent a piece on Victor Wembanyama. I'm writing something called a map of Victor Wembanyama. It's like I think I'm into like 12,000 words by this point, breaking down every single micro skill of Victor. It's one article per skill. I touch on shooting versatility in the article coming up. But yeah, a lot of video, a lot of stats, and trying to break down what can go right, what can go wrong, and try to, cut with the generalizations and say, okay, why is Wembanyama a good shooter? Because of this and this and this and this. And how could he fail because of this and this and this? I think by the end of the map, I'm going to, if I can just put all the weaknesses, I can give NBA teams a blueprint on how to stop him. I might do that as well. But yeah, that's what I have coming up. And then, I'm covering the rest of the international prospects in the 2022 draft, as well as the U18, U16 competitions around the world, with the prospects coming up in the pipeline for 2024 and beyond. So yeah, that's the type of content you're gonna find on my Twitter feed and on Draft Digest. So yeah, be sure to check that out. And once again, thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. The Victor Wembanyama expert, international scout extraordinaire. If you want to know about international class, definitely if you want to do a deep dive into Victor Wembanyama, there is no one better than Ignacio Rissotto, who will be back if the team does somehow land the number one overall pick again. Then yeah, we're going to be here talking about Victor Wembanyama ad nauseum. So muchas gracias. Thank you so much again for being here. This is Woodward Pistons. Follow us, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at Woodward Pistons. Follow me, Steve, at ResBallPod. Listen to my podcast. I also have a Substack, which we're going to be pumping out more scouting reports there. I'll contribute to Woodward Pistons again through the coaching searches, through the draft prospects. Thank you so much again, and we will catch you next time.